Cal Arcade.
Okay, so last month we released a video, honestly not expecting it to gain any traction, critiquing the channel Cinemassacre as longtime fans, mostly critiquing their technical setups, as well as, of course, their history with Screenwave, this company that they outsourced most of their that James Rolfe, I had been saying outsourced most of operation to, apparently sold Cinemassacre to Screenwave. So Screenwave owns Cinemassacre. And so those folks that you see on on their podcasts, like Kieran and Justin, those guys run Cinemassacre now. And this past weekend, these past couple of days, Monster Madness, it was supposed to be a return to their old series, where for 31 days through all of October, it's a really fun idea they used to do, where James would post a video every day of October reviewing a horror movie you may or may not have heard of that was either iconic during an era or for a genre, or he did Godzilla, he did 80s, really a good staple of Halloween. They were returning to that form, the 31-day form. And it turned out that on the very first upload, the very first day, the Cinemassacre Truth Reddit discovered that a significant portion of the script that James read, not that he wrote, but that he read, contained plagiarized material, like verbatim quotes and phrases lifted from a variety of sources, but most primarily a UK review, I think it was, in 2003 of 28 Days Later. The movie was 28 Days Later. All I want to say before we dive into the particulars is that I acknowledge that this topic of conversation is not important. We, as content creators, find it interesting. As longtime fans, we find it interesting. We learned from the last video that other people find this very interesting, that it's also extremely divisive. We got a lot of hate on that last video as being bottom feeders, as being people who are, drama queens or that sort of thing. I don't particularly delight in others' misfortune. Again, it's an interesting topic of conversation, and one that some of our audiences, quite a few members of our audience, have asked us to cover. If you're looking for the video that like buries these guys or rakes them through the coals or something, this ain't the video for you. But if you're looking for the video that like makes a ton of excuses for what's obviously blatant plagiarism and also kind of like a fraudulent channel, then so basically what I'm saying is this is a video for nobody. It's bound to piss people off.
Here's the thing, is that it personally interests me a lot, and I want to talk about it publicly, to maybe my detriment, maybe to Frankie's detriment, maybe to our channel's detriment. I just need to. I need to talk about it. It's interesting. It's fascinating. It's like anything. You got to talk about the train wrecks that happen.
Yeah. So let's get into the particulars. What happened over the last 2 or 3 days?
Yeah. So people pinged us that this was happening, so I was kind of unaware of it at first. A user from Reddit said he was a bit suspicious of some wording because it didn't sound like James or any of the quote-unquote slobs.
That jumped out to me, too, by the way. James being like, you can't help but think of 9/11 while watching 28 Days Later. I was like, he's never really kind of gone there, normally.
Yeah, so I watched it, and here's what I found suspicious of it is, yeah, it didn't sound like a James review. It sounded more like a video essay. Yes. That are popular, like the Did You Know Gaming or something like that. It was like a ton of like facts and tidbits, and I'm like, this doesn't really sound like, and there was some of that in James Monster Madness, but it was more like kind of the personal connection to it, the reaction to it, maybe some of the history of where it's placed. But really, you could tell his enjoyment. This kind of felt like more. It felt like more of those video essays you see on YouTube, which, people make their bread and butter off those things. I watch
reading Wikipedia and monetizing it. That's kind of the idea, right?
Yeah, and I've watched a ton of those. I'm totally fine with it.
The one that comes to mind of classic Cinemassacre that I really enjoyed was I don't remember what the movie was called, but was it called like The Claw or something? It was the one that was about like a giant claymation bird, and everybody in the movie kept saying flying battleship, and James just like was really delighting in calling it a flying battleship. Yeah, to your point, like you get from him what he enjoyed about the thing and he wants to share it with you. This is him talking about like 28 Days Later is a comment on 9/11. You know?
So let me continue with this Reddit user's suspicions. So I searched some of the keyword combinations. Crazed cannibal killers is what got the hit to the review webpage. I was actually initially looking up the line about Nightmare City since I was generally interested in the movie, but it didn't seem in Cinemassacre's wheelhouse. There didn't seem to be anything they blatantly took from articles about it, but there were a lot of comparisons between that movie and this one with the running zombies. So, yeah, there were some phrases that didn't seem very James Rolfe that he started searching and then came up with that article, and then he highlighted some which I will pull up.
And it was no red flag for me hearing James say things that don't sound like he wrote it. That's old hat at this point. It's established fact that he does not make his own content, despite that behind the scenes video where he was like, sometimes people say that I'm not making the content. That is not true. I make all this content. I got help. Do you want me to suffer? Like, no, I get it, James. You've decided about 5 years ago, maybe longer, that you wanted to transition away from this YouTube auteur thing you were doing into this kind of like content farm thing instead. And you didn't really announce your intention to do that. You hoped no one would notice. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes I think that he made. He probably should have announced his intention to, but so the point is when I hear things that don't sound like James, it doesn't strike me as odd anymore, but it didn't occur to me that it might be plagiarized.
Yeah, because I think we've said for a long time that like before this plagiarism thing, we thought the biggest scandal was that the content wasn't any good.
And actually, I still think that's the biggest scandal.
That's the big, yeah, I know. Actually, the plagiarism thing is like, okay. But like, it's interesting to talk about. And in fact, like most people didn't care until it was an ethical dilemma.
Right.
So some of the lines taken from the article: set in post-apocalyptic Britain devastated by an epidemic that within seconds of infection transformed the victims into crazed cannibal killers. So yeah, there's definitely like whole sentences lifted here. And you can look up the rest.
Yeah, was
of them,
James ever the type to like be like crazed cannibal killers? I got some alliteration there.
Yeah, it's something that a British journalist in the early 2000s would write.
I can't help but think about 9/11 when I watch this movie. Like, really?
Because it just happened.
When seeing the film today and being put into that time period, you can't help but think of 9/11 and all those TV images of Ground Zero and Baghdad being devastated by war.
Then this was the interesting thing is people started commenting on the Cinemassacre website about, hey, I think this is plagiarized, but somebody kept deleting all of those plagiarism references. So all of the comments about plagiarism started being deleted, and a lot of time passed, like hours and hours and hours, without the video being taken down, without any. And I don't
think we established it this year too. So Monster Madness went through this trouble period where, for the first few years, they uploaded to For the first few years, it was so far back that YouTube wasn't the primary mode of distribution for Cinemassacre. It was Cinemassacre.com. Then when YouTube became the place, they really couldn't, with the copyright restrictions on YouTube, they couldn't use full clips anymore. They couldn't risk the channel's status anymore. So he started doing things like using stills instead of full motion video, and or they started doing more kind of podcast format, that sort of thing. This year, I think they knew that that something was missing with that format, and so they decided to release on their website exclusively. So there's like a trailer to Monster Madness. It says, go to Cinemassacre.com. It's a newly released version of their website because their website had been kind of defunct for a while. And it seems they're using a video hosting site called Odyssey, which has its own kind of cryptocurrency monetization program. They're one of these.
Yeah, so they could presumably use more movie clips and not be bothered. It could be more in the spirit of the original Monster Madness, or so we were
And they didn't
told.
drive traffic to Odyssey. They didn't say, go to Odyssey and watch the video. They said, go to our website and watch the video. I wanted to watch it on my Roku. Odyssey is actually available for Roku. So I was like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Oh, okay. So eventually, like overnight, they take it down. And actually, another review, Bad Taste, was posted, and it was taken down. And there was some plagiarism in that one too, but that was taken down, and they put up another one which had, I guess, less plagiarism.
And let's face it, it's immediately evident that what's going on here is that the writer of the script, who Cinemassacre Truth speculates or knows or something, is this guy Newt. If you're like a new viewer here or you're not deep inside this stuff, Newt is an on-screen talent, or I think a Screenwave writer employee. He's on some of Screenwave's content. I don't think he's ever formally been in Cinemassacre content before, but he's been on like Tony from Hack the Movies podcast and stuff. And he was actually strangely well liked by Cinemassacre Truth because he had a little bit more natural charisma and chemistry with the guys. And it was announced, I don't know, 6 months ago when they started working on it. Because this is a huge project, by the way. Like, you have to give them credit. Like, no matter who's working on it, no matter who's plagiarizing, just to write it, just to edit it, just to compile it is a huge effort. So they started like 6 months ago, and it was on Twitter that something like Newt was like, "I'm so glad to be writing the majority of this." You know, I remember that was a scandal where it was like, James isn't even going to write Monster Madness. This is one thing that, like, maybe he's kind of done with AVGN, but Monster Madness was like his reason for existing at one point before my kids. So like he can't even kind of muster it up for that. So this Newt guy was known to be the writer going into this, and now he's therefore, and all public statements about it haven't named him or anything. But the fan community seems to think that this Newt guy might be responsible. Maybe. Yeah.
So the video was taken down eventually, and Justin Silverman, who is he's the CEO or whatever of Screenwave,
Kingpin.
right? Kingpin of Screenwave, he put out a statement and said, "Unfortunately and regrettably, this video contains plagiarized work from a 2014 review article of the film," which I don't think is true. In the chaos of putting together notes for our new 31 videos, someone slipped up and slid cited sources and notes into the script as actual dialogue. We sometimes look at reviews from years past to see how criticism of the film has evolved over the decades, and sometimes cite them. Yes, James usually does all the heavy lifting on the previous year's Monster Madnesses, sometimes with others, but this year he trusted me to get everything together, and I failed him. And all of you. There will be punishment over this for myself, but our goal is to get out the rest of the episodes this month without incident. I, James, and Cinemassacre as a whole sincerely apologize. It will not happen again, and has never happened with Monster Madness before. Plagiarism is vile and never okay. I understand this fully before and after this incident. This 28 days later review will be rewritten, revoiced, and replaced soon. So, that sounds like it's a lie.
Well, they obviously were
speculating.
Were at a crossroads where there was I'm sure, just from a pure PR, pure channel survival perspective, they probably were like, can we contain this to a Reddit drama? Can this be, because these videos aren't going to get the same traffic from when they were on YouTube. We can curate the comments. Maybe we can, maybe it'll go, maybe it'll just be the next, Mike Matei style transgression. They probably considered that. And then I think, is it a coincidence that the very first one contains it? Or, because I think it's reasonable for Justin as the boss and James as the, I guess, unengaged boss. Let's just talk about Justin. I think he managed this whole thing. He says he's the manager of this whole thing. I think it's reasonable for him to assume that any self-respecting employee would not be doing what happened here. So when he's like, man, I really should have like checked all these scripts for plagiarism. My perspective is like, I don't know. I think it's reasonable that he didn't. So it really becomes a question of what his response is. It took a few hours or a few, whatever, but he did decide, I think, for the health of the channel, he was like, we've got to cop to it entirely. But then he's faced with these other problems of like, well, then I also sort of have to admit that James has nothing to do with these anymore.
Yeah, because he separated and he says like these are being like written over the course of a decade, and it's like a 5-minute movie review was written over the course of a decade.
Very confusing. If he had asked me for my input on that statement, I'd be like, maybe I would just remove the part about I've been working on this for the last century.
Yeah, just be like, oh, there's some plagiarism. We'll get to the bottom of it. We took it down. We'll rework it. We're sorry. This will never happen. That's really where you have to go.
But we all know what it is. Every last one of us knows what it is because we've all done it at some point when we were juveniles, which is you don't know what to write for the essay at school. And so you
have 31 essays to write.
You have a tremendous amount of you got to get the term paper in. And so you farm online for like phrasing and ideas that you don't otherwise have because you can't form your own yet for whatever, especially if you're younger. And you sort of like bang out like a plagiarized version of the essay, and then you rephrase enough that it wouldn't, attract anybody's attention. But since I was young, I did something akin to that when I was 14 years old in high school for like it was like write 2 paragraphs, and I like kind of like lifted 2 paragraphs from something, and another girl submitted the same thing. That's just the exact same thing.
Oh.
And so Mr. Cook, I don't know if he's still around. He calls us up and he's like, what the fuck? And it was one of the most embarrassing things ever, because it goes like people take plagiarism really super seriously, and it was a smart thing for them to like nip it in the bud, like as an ethical matter at such a young age, because like I never wanted to be, because there's obviously getting in trouble, and there is the shame too of like, man, like I don't have my own ideas, I can't write 2 paragraphs without like and my understanding is that since then plagiarism detection software is like through the roof. Like you can catch this stuff really easily. And apparently, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but to me, it's one of the most fascinating parts about it. Some legal analyst or somebody who does legal analyst work on the Reddit took the transcript, took all of the potential sources, and kind of formed a track changes. And that's when you see precisely what happened. That's when it's no longer ambiguous. It's very clearly like the draft was plagiarized, it was rephrased some, and then it was off to the races. That's clearly what happened.
Yeah, I would suggest you look up that on the Cinemassacre Truth. Yeah, it happened. And I too was kind of nipped early in the bud with plagiarism. I had a teacher who was like, "Now don't you plagiarize, because I have this special software." And this was in the early 2000s. I doubt he actually had this software, but he bragged that he had it, and he scared me enough that I'm like, oh, I guess this is easily detectable, so I shouldn't do it. And my philosophy on like stealing things in general is I'm pretty okay with it most of the time. Like I'm okay with stealing like ideas or concepts or themes, and like, because usually as a filmmaker, if I do that and I make a film, I'll still kind of be a better artist in the end, even if I stole all of those things. But it's
a time of remixing, transformative content, homage, parody. These are all of the things that can be on the edge that I think decidedly aren't plagiarism.
Writing's a little different, because if you're just lifting whole paragraphs and just like calling it a day, you're not crystallizing your own words, your own thoughts, and you're not going to become a better writer. So it's to me, it's just a little yuckier because of that. It doesn't feel as authentic. But that's really all. I mean, like I said, the content before this was the problem.
Now, did you see there was another follow-up, which was when one of the Redditors was demonstrating the potential plagiarism in the bad taste review. And just to be a bit more particular, that Odyssey site, I think probably had scheduled uploads for these because it's 31 days. So bad taste went up. It was bad taste, Peter Jackson's bad taste from New Zealand. It was supposed to be day 2. That popped up. Somebody saw it and somebody started analyzing it. But they, I think, had reason to suspect that one too. So they had planned to swap it out with, I think it was the host. So the point is they kind of knew. So when that guy started demonstrating that, Justin responded to that too. Justin's really engaged on the Reddit. It's downright odd. I mean, I kind of commend him for it, but at this point, because that's obviously his biggest opponents, and it's like better. I suppose it's better to be in communication with them and to dissuade them of some things if some things aren't true. But anyway, it was something like oh Jesus Christ, not again, because he hung his hat a lot on like hopefully it's just this one complete and utter incident of the very first upload. It was like, yeah, I wouldn't bank on it.
I think there's 31 of these.
I think this is a method. Now, of course, if it's going to be revoiced, if it's going to be re-edited in any kind of way, I imagine that causes technical challenges, scheduling challenges, if they actually want to continue this thing. Plus, they got to involve Jamesy, because Jamesy records it.
He's got to record past 5:40.
So James, seems to have decided to trying to get his money's worth out of Screenwave and have them handle the crisis relations type stuff.
A lot of people on the subreddit were like, why isn't he going out there? Why isn't he like making a statement? And I mean, maybe it's smart that he does.
Maybe,
I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, certainly like the times that he does jump in front of the camera and say like, hey guys, just so everybody knows, I tape shit to my ceilings. That gets us.
And all your comments, you guys are all assholes.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of Cinemassacre detractors are feeling vindicated by this. Because comments like his, like ashhole-ish variety, certainly our video, like just the amount of people that are like, fuck you, you jealous, bottom-feeding, sniveling, smug dickheads. Where it's like, well, I can't, when we found out that these guys like are fraudulent and completely inauthentic, we weren't shocked. Are you? Or are you still making excuses? I don't know.
Well, I did see some comments on the actual Cinemassacre subreddit of like, they were starting to be like, wow, I'm kind of disappointed that like, James isn't writing these.
Yeah, have you not been paying attention? Like, have you not like, did you watch the Pepsi Man AVGN and think like, this is classic James?
I think they're just engaging with it differently. Maybe I don't
maybe
know.
some of them are 12.
It's true.
Or maybe most of them are 12.
And we're just the old men.
We got a fair amount of comments that were like, "You're a bit too old for this." But look, I got a podcast and I want to talk about things, and
just general disappointment that James hasn't said anything himself. I saw
it continues to baffle me that like there's a huge swath of people who haven't thought that something stinks in Cinemassacre land. Like you don't, and like BO might I add. See, it's those kinds of jokes that end up getting me all the bad comments.
Yeah, well, we can't help ourselves.
But to me, the like you, I watch my fair share of recommended junky YouTube videos just about topics that I enjoy. And for all I know, they're read off of Wikipedia. And frankly, if Monster Madness was just read off of Wikipedia, it wouldn't really bother me all that much because I just like the vibe. I like, he could have like the Wolf Howl, Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, read a Wikipedia article to clips and then end it. And I would be like it would put me in
put all the sources in the comments, it would put me in the description.
So, for me, just as a fan, it's less about the ethics around the plagiarism thing, which again, I think ultimately just purely the plagiarism issue, the ethical issue of plagiarism, I feel lies at the feet of the person who did it and doesn't make the rest of them plagiarists. It does make the rest of them frauds, but we already knew that they were frauds. And yeah, to me, that's like, again, there's content I watch that's sort of fraudulent and inauthentic, and it's like Watch Mojo or whatever the fuck. But not that I'm subscribed to Watch Mojo. Yeah, but if it's like top 10 Power Rangers villains, I'm like, okay.
So I'm on the elliptical.
Yeah,
I'll watch it.
exactly. But James, and there's somebody dug up a clip from like one of those status update videos or something where he was like, I'm low on time. This was years ago. He's like, I'm low on time, and people say I should get help. I should outsource some of this. I should get other editors. And I thought about it, but it's not really possible because the whole appeal is that I'm giving you my opinion on things like movies, and so I can't have somebody else write that, who then steals it from yet another person. So unfortunately, I have to do them all. So at some point, he must have decided, well, I'm just going to like abandon that principle in the interest of continuing to have to farm content. But still, I think that like, what is Cinemassacre selling? Is it selling like, oh, come here to just listen to like white noise about nostalgia and retro games? Or is it selling James Rolfe's perspective on retro games and horror movies and pop culture? I think that what the product they sell is James Rolfe's opinion. And to have that opinion have vaporized to this extent, to have it this buried, it's just really sad. It's again, like to anybody who's made the point of like, I thought this was the thing he loved. I thought this is the thing he wanted to make space for. It is kind of like a thorough verification that he's done with all of it. He's fucking done.
Yeah, he wants to play the cover band.
Yeah,
and I mean that's cool. I would rather him do what he's passionate for and make less videos. And maybe if a video he comes up with really sparks him, he makes it. Kind of the JonTron thing where you go months without a JonTron video, but when it comes out, he wanted to make it, and he put all of his effort into it.
I still think that he could have come out and said, hey guys, I've been doing this for, let's say, back when it was 10 years. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've given you let's go to Tarantino for a minute. Tarantino's made, the last 30 years, he's dedicated his life to filmmaking. He's out there doing press for the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood novelization, and people keep asking, Joe Rogan, Bill Maher, everywhere he goes, they're like, did you say your next movie is your last one? What's up with that? You're still on top of your game, blah, blah, blah. And his answer is always like, well, I'm worried. I want to quit while I'm ahead, essentially. There's like an element to I want to quit while I'm ahead. And he's also like, I've given my entire life to this. I haven't left anything in the tank. Every time I've made a movie, I've given it everything. And so like when I'm done, I'm done. And so I think if James had said, I've given you 10 years of my life and it's been a great 10 years and I was making videos about every episode of TMNT and TMNT, crazy toppings and AVGNs that were, that we were underqualified to make, but we made them anyway. We made a feature film. We've been working really hard for you. And I would like to start, now that we've done all that, I'd like to start transitioning into a more normal family life. But I don't want to lose contact with you. So I'm going to this Cinemassacre is going to become more of a group collaborative. I have some friends that I think that you will like. I'd like to now introduce you to them. They ought to be good. Bootsy, Kyle, and Mike would do. Would do you well. And they're going to be making a lot of the content, probably most of the content. I'll be popping up and because I never want to lose contact with you, but that's my stated intention. I think that would have been so much better. And I've heard that Mike Matei is, independently wealthy, retired, something, that was part of his calculus for leaving the channel. So if that's true, then surely James is okay as well, right? Like, how badly does he need this? I don't know. That's not for me to know, but I have to wonder.
Yeah, I think just the clear communication would have made everything way better. And, he
really struggles with that clear communication thing. Like, at one time it was characterized as being anti-drama. And now it's like,
Yes.
I think somebody articulated it really well on the Reddit. They were like, he avoids drama even when it shows up to his front door. You know, you had made a point offline, like, say what you want about Doug Walker. He's not a plagiarist.
It's true.
Although, yeah, we're gonna get dinged for that because obviously the company has been alleged to.
Oh yeah, he has other ethical issues, obviously, but you can't say that what he's doing is not his own.
Yeah, I think most importantly with him, after we made our video, he was in some interview where they were like, "Hey, how do you do with like negative criticism and that kind of thing?" And he was like, "Well, as long as it's funny, I can have a sense of humor about it." And he seemed genuine. And he was also like, "Look, like, you know, I'm just lucky to be doing this. I really love doing it. And it's okay if it doesn't hit with everybody. In fact, if they make feature length reviews about how awful I am, that's kind of interesting too. That's like transfer." He had a really good outlook on it. But when that crazy bastard, when that Bugs Bunny of a man, or Daffy Duck of a man says, "I really love doing this green screen trash that I make every week," I believe him. I actually think he loves that green screen trash.
Oh yeah, you can't make the amount that he does without loving it.
Yeah. So there's something to be, applauded there, I suppose. But then again, I mean, I was going to say James seems to love his cover band green screen trash as well. But actually, I don't know. I don't have a great sense of how much of those videos he even produces. Is that also outsourced?
I think he likes that. I think he likes that he can just show up, do his little rock guitar thing, and go home.
What is that fucking face that he does? The one that's like, "Yeah, rock and roll music is fun." It's kind of like sarcastic a little bit, but maybe it's not. I don't know. It reminds me of when they read ads, these guys. They're like, "Did you know that Raycon?" Like, they always have to make a joke about it. Or I'm like, "Why don't you just read the fucking ad, Tony? Why don't you just read the ad?"
It is that weird jokey, like, "Oh, I can't believe we're making an ad."
I'm embarrassed by myself. I'm embarrassed about all of this.
I just read the copy.
Just read the copy.
Read the copy.
But I do. There's a lot of people who do not feel bad for Justin Silverman. They feel like he's been as much a part of the mismanagement of this whole thing as anybody. Obviously, he has a lot of responsibilities on it. I do feel bad for him. Don't kill me. I think that he, more than anybody, perhaps he seems to be the only one taking responsibility for anything.
Yeah, I mean, I got to applaud him for that. I do think, he's definitely being diplomatic.
Yeah. No, actually, I think when he answers the questions on the subreddit, when he's done his AMAs and stuff, I'm sort of impressed by. I mean, it's all bullshit. It's all, like, and everybody knows it's bullshit, but he does a decent job at making his responses sound vaguely authentic and sincere when they clearly aren't and can't be. I don't envy that job. If I was getting paid to do what he has to do, I'd have to lie a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know if I can feel bad for him.
No doubt. You know what I think? Here's a hot take. Okay. I think that he is a truther. I think that he loves that Reddit just as much as the next person because he knows just how true it all is. And he kind of does enjoy it on some level. I'm sure it's stressful, but on some level, he's like, these guys have it, man. They know.
You know what? On that, I think we got to end it.
I think so. But you know what? Hey, Justin, you're a highly engaged person in this whole thing. If you ever want to come on here and we can chat about some of this stuff, I know, again, I don't know how you would. It would be like, how could you possibly have a genuine conversation about this kind of thing? Because it cuts pretty deep into the company. But I would love to chat with Justin.
Yeah, I would like to chat with him. He seems pretty engaged. Yeah. You can find us. You can go to the Red Cow subreddit. You can find us.
No hate, truly.
Yeah. We understand.
I guess scripts from this point on are going to have to go through one of those pieces of software. That's probably what they'll have to do.
Oh, yeah, and I would fire the person
who
wrote it. I guess unless it's James, then you gotta. I don't know.
Well, here's a note to leave off on. There's no way it was James. It's factually impossible.
I don't know. Maybe he was like, "I'll write a couple of them."
The greatest way to avert risk and to skirt liability is to not work. Tape shit to the wall and don't listen to anybody. Or the ceiling, excuse me.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.